If you sell a complex product or service, almost every new client relationship is going to start with some sort of conversation, whether it's over the phone or via Zoom or face to face. Wouldn't it be helpful if you had a structure or a framework or a formula to guide you through that conversation? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. My business partner, John Englezos, will be revealing his one call close formula. And make sure that you stick around to the end so that you can get hold of this. Yes, it is indeed the one call close formula worksheet. Let's do this. So I'm sitting here with my good buddy, John Englezos right now. How you doing, Johnny?
Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Good. So Johnny is my buddy. He is my brother from another mother. He's also my business partner, along with Simon Ogilvy Lee, since we started the B2B school and even before on a number of different ventures. And John has a natural talent, which is sales. Now, I know lots of people that are great at sales, but however, when it comes to training other people or showing other people how they do what it is that they do, not so good. Indeed, I've probably said it before, which would you prefer? Someone who's naturally great at sales, a natural seller, or someone who's not naturally great at sales and has a system to follow? And the reality is the person who's not naturally great at sales, who has a system to follow, will usually beat the person who's great at sales, because people who are great at sales are often inconsistent. Now, John here is great at sales and also has a system, which means that he can be consistent, which means that we can plan, we can map things out with a high degree of certainty, and we can also train up other people within our world to do this. Now, John, this is called the one, what's it called? The one call?
One call close.
The one call close formula. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to close every time on the phone. But it's beginning with that mindset of being able to close. Now, I just said the phone, but you don't always do these on the phone either, do you?
Well, we're starting to do them on Zoom. Because everyone's adapted to Zoom. And of course, we can do more over Zoom. I mean, I can chart things, I can make things look good. I can bring up examples, which I can't do on the phone. So we're certainly doing more via Zoom. But the origin of this is really through, years of experience of me hounding this device. Smashing the phones. As a little bit of a story, the first time I ever sold, it was a cold environment. I paid my sister $50 to jump on Google and basically get me a list of like 200 businesses that fit a certain mold. And that's how I started my business. I was young, hungry, 21 and stupid. And I called and I called and I called and I called and I called. And I got rejected like 190 times, but I eventually closed the client and it was great. But that's really the origin of this, and God knows how many calls since that we've had.
So let's talk about this. Let's talk about this idea of consistency, because it is called the one call close formula, and the reason is because there was a time in most of our worlds, and I'm talking about probably before COVID, pre-COVID, where almost the modus operandi for most people would have multiple meetings to close any sale, and most of them were done face to face. Now we live in a world where it's most of the time it's done over the phone or done via Zoom. Now in a week, how many of these sales calls or Zoom sessions could you possibly reasonably do, or would you want to do over the course of a week?
Well, our target is a minimum of 16, right? How many could I perceivably do? The reality is as many as my diary can fit, but you need to have space between calls. You got to get your mindset right for the next call. Not every call, even though you schedule it for 45 minutes, is going to be 45 minutes. Some are going to go for an hour and 15. So we safely say that in my diary, we don't book any more than 5. So, and I won't sell every day of the week.
5 a day. So yeah, that's 5 times 5 is 25.
Yeah, exactly right. So somewhere between 20 to 25 calls a week.
Yeah. So we often talk about a minimum, which we try and aim for a minimum of 16 a week. Now, if we're talking about 16, we're talking about consistency, we're talking about metrics, we're talking about tracking those things. Now, you're not closing all 16. If we did 16 in a week, you're not closing all 16.
No way.
In fact, I'm going to put this out there. If John books 20 meetings, the reality is that maybe 2 to 4 might not even show up. So 20 calls, 4 might not show up. Then there's 16. If we're talking about 16 calls or strategy sessions or Zoom calls as a metric, what does the breakdown of those calls look like? How many do you close?
Yep.
What's it look
like? So first thing to point out is that despite having the world's greatest filtering systems, people will still, filter themselves into a call with you. So if I have 16 in any given week, not all of them are going to be the Goldilocks lead, but because we've got such good filtering systems, only a small portion of them have learned how to gamify the tool and get themselves in. So if I had 16 meetings, about 20%, so let's call it 3 to 4, just don't fit. They don't fit the mold for whatever reason, and that's okay. So now we're left with about 12 prospects. Now, in the 12 prospects that are left, I'm lucky enough that I get into a situation where I can close somewhere around 3 to 4 out of the 12, if not a little bit more. It's going to depend on the quality of the lead. Now, not all of them are going to be a one call close, as James said. So in my world, a portion of them I close in one call. Now that's typically for anything that's worth less than about $4,800. So our flagship courses, for instance, we can close typically in one call. It doesn't require many calls. Anything that's at that $4,800 or higher, I find it requires 2 calls. But in my world, all that happens is it goes to a second call, which is a decision call, and that's the end of it. And in terms of getting into a decision call, I close almost every single one, because someone wouldn't book a second call to have a discussion about paying you money if there wasn't some indication they might want to pay you money. But as you know, sometimes you're not always going to have all the decision makers on the call at once. So you have to have that type of scenario. So I'm either closing them onto a product that's worth less than 4,800, or closing them into a second call, which is really to close them.
So some metrics here. If you had 20 people book a meeting, it could be that 4 of them don't show up, or they postpone it, or they cancel it, or they simply point out that the decision maker is not going to be there. And John says, I don't want to have the call unless the decision maker is going to be there. Then you have about 16. Of the 16, there might be 20, 25%, which is 4 that are just not a fit. And we have mechanisms to try and keep the people who don't fit out. Give me an example of a mechanism, John.
Yeah, so we've obviously got our forms. They're able to filter people in and filter people out so we can qualify them. I'm obviously seeing all the leads as they come into Dash. So I'm able to work out who, sometimes I get an assumption about someone and my assumption's right. So we'll close the door on them.
Yeah. So there might be a triage form, which someone has to complete, mini diagnostic. We have deal breaker questions. We have red flag questions. If they don't answer the question in the right way, they're not given the opportunity to book a meeting. So there's a vetting process that happens before that. We also know that it should be reasonably the right person, because they might have opted into our world to get a specific gift or registered for a webinar. Then they're given the opportunity to book the meeting. So there's a vetting process that happens before this. So of our 24 might not show up, or they reschedule. Of the 16 that's remaining, 25% are just not a right fit. They get on the call, they've lied in the online form. They're just not the right mindset. They're not coachable. And we can figure that stuff out pretty quickly, which leaves 12, and Johnny will close 3 to 4 of them. So it really works out, of the 16 calls, it's usually 1 in 4 that he will close. But not of those 4, it might be 2 require a decision call, and 2 of them, it's a 1 close call. Now, I also just want everyone who's listening to this to observe the dollar figures. In my not so humble opinion, if you're selling something for under $10,000, you should, in theory, be able to close on the call, and then, as a bare minimum, get a deposit. Now, we've talked about anything above 4,800. If it's 4,800, often there's a second call. But anything under $2,000, that would be a close on the first call, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, that's not to say that every time I sell a 4,800, I have to go to a second call. There have been many cases. In fact, in my world, the split's probably 50-50. Half of those who buy a 4,800 just give me the coin on the spot. I've always got the payment page open in front of us, and then half may go to that second call. I've even had scenarios where they book the second call in, and then they get back to me on email a lot later, and they say, hey, let's just do this. I'm ready to go. Certainly, as James said, anything below $10,000, you want to be shooting to try and close the amount of time it takes to close. It's just not, because you got to think about every hour, every minute, every hour that you spend trying to close someone, that actually tallies up. Right? So if you're having 3 or 4 calls to close a $5,000 deal, don't forget to account for that. So anything below $10,000, we want to try and close that as fast as possible, ideally as quick as one call. Anything over 10,000, and by the way, in my world, it still only takes 2 calls. So $10,000, if that was the offer, it's still only one more decision call. It's just that I've found with the 4,800s, it could go either way. So definitely anything under $4,800 though, you want to close it on the spot.
Yeah, and you'll sometimes as well to ask for a deposit. So they're keen, they're ready to go. It might require a decision call, it might not.
So that's a really good point. That's a really good point because yes, if I was thinking about the metrics, I mean, I get a deposit as often as I can. And for a $4,800 product, I get a $480 deposit. That still goes to a decision call, but as James has identified, we've got the deposit. Now, ask me how many times someone has given me $480 as a deposit for, or $960 as a deposit to our $9,600 program. And then, 3 weeks later or 2 weeks later or 1 week later in the decision call said, actually give me my money back.
So you said, yeah, how many have done that? Pretty much never.
It's never happened.
Never happened. It's never happened. All right. Yeah. Wow. Okay. It's never happened. I'll tell you, we do have people can pay a deposit for one of our highest programs online where I think they pay $96. I think that there has had 2 people in the entire history of that ask for their deposit back. Yeah. It's when someone pays a deposit, it's a high level of commitment. And we have recorded another video elsewhere, which is about objection handling. And the deposit's a really great way to tackle some of the objections, which is, why don't we put a deposit down now? And here's a bunch of different reasons for doing that. Now, one more thing before you run through the one call close formula, and we've got some great worksheets to share. When we're talking about a strategy call or a sales call, and we're getting people to voluntarily book these calls, it's not a typical sales call, is it? They're not booking for, what do they call it? A free consultation, no obligation quote. Yeah, what are they booking?
Yeah, well, they're booking in with an appointment with purpose. We call it an appointment with purpose. And that's because you want to have a clear outcome. You want to be able to beat people's obstacles. You want to be able to be helpful on these calls. Because at the end of the day, it's the law of reciprocity. If I help you, you're going to be more likely to want to pay me to continue to help you. If I buy you a coffee, you might want to buy me lunch. So the point of these appointments with purpose is to actually take away the idea of selling. We talk about frictionless sales. It's because we're not getting on the phone to say, all right, I'm desperate and I need to take your money. So let me try and find 1,000,001 ways that I can convince you to give me money. The point is to get on, simply focus on delivering value. Simply focus on helping them with their obstacles. If you do that, people don't book the call for no reason. I've never had someone book a call with me, a 45-minute funnel mapping session, and say, well, I'm here because, I don't really know why. My marketing's awesome. No one books the call because everything is going well. They're booking the call because they've got a clear deficiency, and we want to help them with that. But of course, and I say this up front, you'll see this in my script in a moment. I say, and by the way, when we get to the end of this call, when I'm delivering the agenda, I say, when I get to the end of this call, I'm probably going to be really tempted to pitch you. But by the way, if I didn't give you value in this call, in no kind words, tell me no. And that's because people know they're going to get pitched. But if we help, we can put ourselves in a position to close the deal because we've helped someone. We haven't just asked for the coin.
So right from the outset, we call it an AWP, an appointment with purpose. So I get messages all the time. Hey, James, let's catch up and explore ways that we can work together. And it's a hidden way for them to try and sell me. Or it might be more direct on the website. Contact us for a free consultation, no obligation quote. And those calls probably close 1 in 2. When you get those sorts of calls, if you're a good seller. But you don't get those many calls because people don't want to book a call and be sold to. But when it's an appointment with purpose, what's the name of the one that we're offering right now called?
That's a 45-minute B2B funnel mapping session.
B2B funnel mapping session. So we know what the outcome is going to be. I want it because I want some help. Do they go for 45 minutes?
No. Well, they go for 45 to 55 minutes. I'm usually closed within an hour, maybe just a touch over an hour, but, usually around 50 minutes.
Yeah, because the reason why it's a 45-minute B2B funnel mapping session is because we know who the audience, B2B, we know the outcome, we're going to map a funnel together. It's 45 minutes, which doesn't sound too time consuming, but people set aside an hour and the last 15 minutes is John being able to introduce the next bit. All right, so with those bigger picture pieces out of the way, and just to recap, one, there's a special name for this. I mean, like, it's promoted and treated like a product. It's not let's just call, it's like, this is your opportunity to book a time with us, and you're going to get some value. Another element about it is that you should be able to close it on the phone if it's under $10,000. There is a pre-qualification process that goes with this. And we know that of, say, 20 calls, we've got a reasonably good idea over time what the metrics are going to look like. Is there anything else that I've kind of forgotten there in terms of pre-framing it?
The only thing to mention is do not forget your elevating anticipation sequence, which is why we only have 4 drop-off and not 50% drop-off before we call. And that is such an important piece. Like, even a simple reminder email 24 hours and an hour before is enough to get started. You obviously, if you're doing it the way that we do it, and those of you who've signed up for calls with me, you've seen, we've got a few videos, we share some extra advice and some content. It does help us frame what we're going to talk about in the call so that we can get to some of those outcomes faster. Certainly you want to be doing it that way, but at the very least, you need to have a reminder sequence, because if you don't, expect that over half will not show up. People are busy.
Yeah.
We want to give them a reason to want to show up.
And it hurts, you're all excited about it. It takes effort to book a meeting. As I said, there's a pre-qualification process. They go through this thing, and then if they don't show it, it hurts. All right, so let's run through this. Share your screen, John. Let's have a look at this.
Do this. So 2 seconds just to get a couple of things on my screen. I'm using one screen, which means I need to pull up your questions separately. Why has this disappeared? Of course. All right. The questions have disappeared and I can't seem to find them. So let's forget.
I can have a look at the questions for you.
James can throw out the questions. But what you can see on my screen right now are 2 worksheets. Okay. Now, these worksheets, by the way, are in the Facebook group. And the one on the left-hand side, this one over here, is the formula itself. So this is the methodology that I'm going to take you through, and I'm going to help you get some context around how this works. On the right-hand side, what you can see here is our actual worksheet. Now, James mentioned earlier, we're pivoting away from doing everything via the phone because there's only so much you can do, and moving on to Zoom so that I can have a worksheet like this in front of us, and I can sit there and try and scribble on it or type in different points in the worksheet. It just gives something tangible to someone when the meeting's done. The other reason why we're moving to Zoom is because, as you know, we sell something like a software called B2B Dash, and we might want people to see that as we're positioning it in the call. So it certainly helps to be able to have all those things open. But
there's also the trust factor. When you can see someone's face and all the other stuff, there's the trust factor that goes with it.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely. And I think that I had a point with purpose this morning, right? And that one went to a decision call. So, the methodology obviously works. But in his case, he targets corporates. And it's funny because he's been in our database for a year. And the reason why he was not interested in doing anything with us a year ago is because he said, well, corporates don't sit behind computers and don't jump on Zoom and don't, and guess how that's changed, right?
Yeah.
So even for someone like that, in an industry that is slow to move, the last to move, I mean, this is a person who's completely shifting to Zoom. And that was one of the big things I wanted to talk about, was being able to sell in those types of ways, right? So that's why we're on Zoom. But anyway, let's bring your attention to the worksheet on the left. This is the formula itself. Now, as we've already just mentioned, elevating anticipation is super, super key. Before we get into this, before we get into the call, one of the reasons why I'm so good, if you want to say that at what I do, is simply because the elevating anticipation sequence allows me to shortcut on some of the knowledge. So if you've got a good sequence, we have a series of 3 videos. In those 3 videos, we're teaching something that leads into what we're talking about in this call. And by the way, people mostly watch them. Even the guy I had a conversation with this morning, when I introduced the idea of outcomes, things, and feelings, when I introduced the idea of the product ecosystem, you know what he said to me? Oh yeah, I watched that in the video. So you mean this? And he's spitting out our language. So that's why you have an elevating anticipation sequence that occurs before the call. It allows me as a salesperson to do my job 10 times better. So that's the real origin. But now we get into the call. So what you can see, we've broken this up into a series of blocks to make life easy. And I'm just going to start rolling through them one by one. So the first thing you need to do And the first row here is all about framing. The first thing you need to do is get permission to, I guess, kick off the call. Now, we call it permission to pitch. Another word that, or term that I like to use, is the 3 yes questions. And this is about gearing someone to get into the call and get involved. We know that we have a better call with someone when they're involved, rather than when they're just listening to my garb. If they're just listening to my garb, they tune off, they go back to Facebook while they're on the phone. But if I'm getting their involvement early on, they're more likely to be involved in the call. So I really ask 3 simple yes questions in this first section here. The first thing is, and this is going to sound so stupid when I say it out loud, is this still a good time for us to talk? Now, they've jumped on Zoom with me, right? Like, are they going to say no? Would they have clicked the Zoom link and jumped on and not rescheduled if the answer is no? The answer is yes. But we're starting to get them to open up, and that's all about mindset stuff, right? Yeah. The second question asked is, great, can I introduce you to our agenda? And of course, no one's going to say, lead me blindly, right? They're going to say yes. So I introduce them to the agenda. And then the last thing is, all right, are we ready to start? I want to kick off with my first question. Are you ready to go? And of course, they say yes. So that's how I lead off every call. And by doing that, as I said, it creates a state of openness. They're actually more willing to give me information, because the word yes is training them to keep saying yes to my questions.
So Johnny's got a framework here, and I encourage you to download this framework and fill the boxes with your own stuff.
Yeah.
So in my world, I say, I have a number of questions that I like to ask to give this conversation some structure and focus. Do you mind if I run through those questions with you? And once again, they say yes. And if they say, no, I've just got this one question here, that's a red flag. But most people are just relieved that I'm going to take control of the conversation, and they will just say yes. Do you, at what point do you introduce the idea to them that you might be selling them a product or service at some point during the call?
So that's a really good thing. I do it in the agenda. So I'll say, great. Right. So what we're going to start with are your champagne moments and your obstacles. I need to know exactly what you're looking to achieve, but we need to get really serious on what your obstacles are, the things that are holding you back. Now, once I have that information, I can start to get a better picture of what you're looking to do in this business, so I can begin to give you some value on this call. And to do that, we're going to be talking about things like your target audience. We're going to be talking about the fist pumping moments that you deliver, and we're going to shape your product ecosystem. Now, at the end of this call, here's the thing. You probably know already that I'm going to be tempted to pitch you. And I am. If I feel like there's a fit, if I genuinely feel like I can help you, I'm going to be tempted to pitch you. Now, if you feel like I didn't give you any value in this call, just hang up at that point in time. I won't take offense. We'll stay friends. You can stay in the database. Hey, unsubscribe if you want. But if you feel like there's an opportunity for me to be able to add that value, given what we've spoken about today, I at least encourage you to hear me out. So I'm positioning that in the agenda, part of the agenda.
And I'm sure, I know you're just recapping things like that. I'm sure you would also use expressions like, is that okay?
Oh, of course.
And then you get another yes. So this first element is about framing it. So this framing is permission to pitch. He's getting all these yeses. What are these other 2 framing bits here?
So the second thing is champagne moments. Now, if any of you had a call with me, the champagne moment, the way we visualize that is it's, hey, fast forward 6 months in your business, or 12 months in your business, or 3 years in your business. When you've gotten to that point, how will you know you've crushed it so far that you can open a bottle of, Veuve Clicquot and spray it all over the house because you've just completely kicked ass, right? How will you know you've gotten there? What does that look like for you? So the reason we ask these champagne moments, and in my script, and everyone can do this a little bit different, but I do 3 years, I do 12 months, and then I look for outcomes in 3 months. The reason I do that is a 3-year goal helps me understand where their head is. If someone says they want to exit in 3 years, that requires a different set of circumstances to someone who says they're looking to scale their business. The 12 months, now that's the goal that people typically set. So I always ask for the 12-month goal because they've already thought about that one. The 3-month is about outcomes today. Because if I know the outcomes, if they're literally telling me, well, I know, like the call this morning, the person literally said to me, I know I need to get better at selling through Zoom, and I know I need to launch my first product and stop trading my time. Those are my 3-month goals. And of course, I can sell something on that, right?
The other thing about 12-month goals, and I see 12-month goals as a lot, people come up with these ideas for what they want to achieve in 12 months, but they're generally unrealistic. But when you say 3 months, they go, what can I reasonably achieve in 3 months? So this
Absolutely.
framing one is just really about taking them to the destination of where they want to be. So they're already projecting forward. They know where they want to get to. What's frame number 3 here?
Well, this is about the obstacles. And at the end of the day, this is what you're here to solve, both in this call and when you're pitching and when they buy your products or services. So framing number 3 is about working out their obstacles. And I'll say things like, when it comes to, and I'll spit out the goal, because I'm obviously writing notes in this sheet, right? I'll spit out the goal. All right, when it comes to that goal, what do you anticipate is going to hold you back the most? What's going to prevent you from getting there? And that's the language that I'll actually use. So what's the champagne 1? I'll ask that question. Champagne 2, ask that question. But my primary focus is on champagne 3, which is the 3-month thing, because I want to be able to create instant relevancy that I can help them. So the obstacles question is about understanding, hey, what's going to hold them back? What's stopping them from being able to get there? And now in my world, by the way, what you'll come to find when you do enough of these calls is people spit out the same things. Okay. So the first time you ever do an appointment with purpose, it's going to feel scary. Maybe the first 10 will feel scary because you don't quite know what people will say. Guess what they say in our world? And this is how we've crafted a better call. I don't know how to pull the technology together.
Yeah.
I haven't got the strategy. I don't feel like I have the support. So when I ask 3 obstacles, typically that's what I'm getting in that champagne 3, right? I don't have the technology. I don't understand the technology. I don't know what technology to use. I don't have the strategy in place, either sales, marketing, or
Keep getting
sales,
pulled from
or
left to right,
yeah,
direction to
whatever it
direction. I need
is.
someone to
And
guide me,
yeah,
or I
and
feel
who's
like
going
I'm
to support
alone
me?
and I have to do it on my own. And they come
100%. And so it's, naturally we've worked that out. You will work that out in time. So that's framing 3.
I was just about to say, I just want to remind everyone. So the document on the one close formula document, that's what you scribble on to plan what you want to do. Then over time, you can start to produce your own worksheet. And when Johnny's on the call and he's speaking with someone on Zoom and he's scribbling all over the worksheet, maybe using like Notability or some digital pen to scribble on the screen, or even if he's just printed it out and he's writing on a piece of paper, or if he's given them the same thing, it makes it a real thing. It turns it into something that they can take away, that they can reflect on. That someone sets a goal and then they look at the obstacle, a new goal, obstacle, new goal, obstacle. Suddenly the goals become real, but the obstacles become equally real and present. This is valuable for John, but it's also valuable for the client.
Yeah, the big thing here is delivering something tangible. We understand that a sales call is intangible. No one can touch it, hold it, own it, right? And same thing as the products and services that we sell. If we're selling things like consulting services, as many of you are, it's intangible. So by having it on the piece of paper in front of them on a screen, or as James said, sometimes if I've written it down, let's say I'll show it up, that's what I used to do, is I'll show it to the call, whatever I've written, or I'll send them a photo if I'm on the phone. It creates something as tangible, and it means it's real, as James said. So they see those obstacles and they start to think that they believe that those obstacles are inherently as important as the champagne moments that they want to achieve.
So we've got our framing. Now, all those 3 questions are pretty much giving John the information that he needs to take the conversation forward, but he's also helping them set goals and see the obstacles. Then we've got an element here, which is add value. And you'll see that there are 2 elements here which say add value. And I coined this, the value sandwich, because when we talk about features, it's so much easier to talk about features when they're wedged between a sandwich of value. So we've got this wedge here which says add value. Every business, it's going to be different, but I know that for most of you, it's what value can I deliver quickly on the call right now, which is usually going to be tied to their champagne moments and their obstacles. You can see that we've got a box. What is the value that we quickly offer, John?
Yeah, so the first thing we get into is always target audience identification and the fist pumping moment that goes with that. It's a massive point of clarity for a lot of business owners. And when I have this conversation, in fact, I've probably had this conversation with many of you in our community. It's a massive hurdle that they jump over, that they start to feel really good about, because often what people tell me is, well, I target SMEs. And I'll say, great. So are you telling me that you target the pie shop down the road where I buy my pies on a Friday afternoon after I've had a beer? And they say, oh, no, we target, small businesses. I'll say, great. So are you telling me that you target the fish and chip shop, or
locksmith,
the grocer, or the
hairdresser,
tobacconist? And they'll say, no, of course not. We can't work with them. And I'll say, great. So what you've just identified is that you're sending a message out to the world and you don't want to even work with 99% of them. And all you're doing is spreading yourself too thin, trying to boil the ocean. So we go through the target audience identification. And how great is it when we map this out and they say back to me something along the lines of, I've got it. So what I'm going to do is I need to target B2B service operators in the construction industry.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then you can say, and how does your product solve their fist pumping moment? And they go, well, when they get this outcome, they're thrilled.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of some marketing. So that's some value. And then we've got like another row of things here. So if the first row is framing, now we're moving into another set of questions.
Yeah.
I hope you notice these are all questions. I mean, like Johnny's asking questions.
Yeah. Now, this is where you're starting to get into a position where you're pitching what it is that you do. By the way, the number one principle we always work off when it comes to pitching is outcomes, things, and feelings, right? Most people just pitch things. So they might pitch a course, they might pitch hours or time. It was the exact conversation I was having with the fellow this morning. He was pitching his time and he was sick of pitching his time and being worth just the number per hour. And so outcomes, things, and feelings inherently in everything I'm about to talk about, that's our principle, which is why it sits there as a reminder. But the thing here is, of course, they presented us with 3 obstacles. And I already know that the 3 obstacles are typically technology, strategy, and support. So what I'm starting to do is introduce our technology stack. Well, hey, but it's in the form of a recommendation. So I might say to someone, it sounds like you're really struggling when it comes to technology. It sounds like you've got what I would call a Frankenfunnel, 15 different things in 15 different places, and it's just not giving you the information you need. Not to mention, you're telling me it's hard to use. Is that correct? Yeah, I can't work out the bloody thing. Great. Well, when it comes to technology, what you really need is an all-in-one that's going to do all of these things. That's going to provide you with all of these outcomes. Hey, how would it feel if you were to get all of this finally nailed? So in this case, I might say, how would it feel if you finally had a system that booked your diary out, that kept your diary full without having to lift a finger?
Yeah. So filling the diary might be the outcome. I want to fill the diary. The thing might be, here's the software that's going to solve it. The feelings is how wonderful is that going to feel?
Yeah.
Now, when you get really good at this, you end up applying this formula to just about everything. So you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, Johnny's got 3 blocks, which is he's adding value, which is features. So one might be the technology, and he'll like say, okay, what technology are you using now? Let's do a little mini audit, adding value. All right, well, let's have a look at where you want to focus when it comes to strategy. Let's talk about your strengths and weaknesses. Let's talk about sales. Let's talk about marketing. Let's talk about scale. Let's talk about what level of support do you have? Do you have people that can support you? So he can ask a bunch of questions around that. But then for each of them, again, he can actually run outcomes, things, and feelings.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, so you're feeling lost. Well, what if we gave you a path? How would that make you feel?
Yeah, absolutely. So as James just identified, because we already know that these 3 things, the typical things that people want to talk about, and of course it's what we offer, and you guys will be able to guess this. Trust me, you're not going to be out in the woodworks. Like, you will be able to guess what this is going to be in 99% of cases. You can apply that model, always bring it back to outcomes, things, and feelings when you're pitching what it is. Pitch what you have as a recommendation. Don't pitch it as if you pay me this amount of money, I can solve that for you. It's too early for that. So what we're doing here is we're talking about obstacles, and then we're giving recommendations. And the recommendation is essentially a feature that we're offering. In our case, we know technology, strategy, and support are the main 3 things. And again, as James said, always bring it back to outcomes, things, and feelings. Most people only sell things. Things aren't what people want. The outcome, the feeling they're chasing. The outcome, the feeling you're fixing.
Yeah, and every feature should tackle all 3. But the way that John's got it framed with his one call close formula structure there, you can't help thinking about it for each one of them. So we have some value where we say, hey, who's your target audience? Then we have another little bit of value, which we won't go into a whole bunch of detail now. But the second half of the value sandwich is we talk about our product ecosystem. And this is where we deliver on the promise. Someone's booked a B2B funnel mapping call. So we're going to deliver on the promise that we made, and we're going to map a funnel together.
Absolutely. And, once again, we know that, you guys are in our community, right? So the importance of this having learned it from us. So once again, it's quite groundbreaking for someone who's never done this before. That's why it's so valuable. We're not just simply saying, oh, you need a funnel.
Yeah,
So go
yeah.
get a
We're
funnel,
saying
you
there are
know?
different, the stages, the stranger, suspect, prospect.
Absolutely.
They're going to have different mindset. We want to do different things at these different points. And you'll notice here on the example on the right, how underneath headaches and strangers, it's got marketing, and the other one has sales and it's got scale. This also reinforces the strategy element that we've got in the middle there. So we've got our value sandwich, and we're introducing our features and recommendations between two bits of value. Now we're moving into the pointy end of the discussion, really, aren't we?
Yeah.
So we've delivered value. We've delivered on the promise. We know where they are. We know where they want to be. But we've got a whole bunch of questions that we ask to bring this home. And I imagine by now you're probably at the 35, 40-minute mark.
Definitely. Yeah. Probably sitting close to 40 minutes at this stage.
Yeah.
Unless you got someone who just yap, something on the line. But yeah, you're about roughly between 30 to 40 minutes at this stage. And this is where I really start to have fun. I'll be honest. This is the part that I love the most. It's the pivot, right? It's the move away from I'm delivering value to I want us to work together. And there's a way to do it. You know, a lot of people screw up this step because they say, great, I'm giving you value. Now, by the way, can we talk about my products and services? I've been in sales calls like that myself, and it makes me giggle. So this is really, really so important. And I'll teach you how I do it. So obviously at this stage, we've given a ton of value. And I actually have a line in my mental script, which says, geez, we've been going on now for 42 minutes. How are you feeling? Have you still got a little bit more time? And they say, yes, so much information. I'll usually, by the way, it's not in here. I'll ask if they have any questions. People never really do, but I'll ask if they have any questions because it's my last opportunity to get them talking about something that's in the top of their mind that I might be able to use as ammunition, right, in my sales pitch. So I'll ask if they have any questions, but really what I'm trying to get to is this. So I start with what we call the COI trigger. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what COI is, cost of inaction. And the cost of inaction is what's going to happen to your business or to you in your world if you don't take action today, if you keep putting this off. What's the impact going to be in 6 months? What's the impact going to be in 12 months? And so the first thing I get into here is I say, right, so I want to do a little bit of a recap because at the start of the call, you know, we were talking about champagne moments and we're talking about obstacles. And I really want to come back to your obstacles at first. So you said to me that 1, 2, 3 things, so I'll mention those 3 things, were really causing you, the things that are really causing you problem in your world right now. These are the things that are holding you back from achieving that champagne moment. Would you agree? Yes. I'll say, great. So let me ask you this question. If nothing were to change in your business today through to the next 12 months, if everything was to stay the same and you continue to have these obstacles in place, what position would your business be in?
Yeah, how much would that hurt?
How much would that hurt? Yeah, that's really the gist of it, right?
How much was that hurt?
The gist of it, you know, how much would that hurt? And they always go quiet for a little bit.
Yeah, what's the mental cost? What's the financial cost if nothing changes in your world?
Exactly right. So that's where I start, is the COI trigger, because now we're about to bring in relevancy to what we can do. And I'll say to them at that point, great, well, look, I do have a few things that I think are going to be able to help you get over that issue. So we'll talk about them in a second. Before I move any further, and now I get into the ROI trigger. Now for me, people might do this in different ways. I know for me, naturally, I go straight back to the champagne moments and I come back to the idea of feelings. So how is it going to feel if we're able to help you fix this issue, not in 12 months, not in 6 months, not even in 3 months, but 60 days or something along those lines, depending on what the offer is. If it's a course,
and you've got to know that you've got something that can deliver the value.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So we'll say something along those lines because we've got those systems set up, and of course they get excited again. They'll say, well, it would feel amazing if I could fix this in the next 60 days. I mean, that's going to change everything for me. So they go from quiet and feeling really, shitty, let's just say the word, to all of a sudden starting to feel really, really good. And it's lifting them back up again. And I'll say, and this is where I ask for permission to pitch. And I will say something along the lines of, great. So I told you earlier that I'm going to be tempted to pitch, but I'm not just the kind of guy who's just going to pitch you. I don't want to do that. So with your permission, do I have your permission to introduce you to how I feel we can help you accomplish that goal in 60 days?
Yeah, no one's going to say no because they're curious. We call the mindset at this particular point the VIP. They are the very interested prospect.
Mm-hmm.
It's even better if they've elevated anticipation beforehand and they've come through a diagnostic and everything, because then they're the inbound or the incoming VIP, the incoming very interested prospect.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you, there's one element that I run in this particular bit here. I'll often say, I've got a couple extra questions for you. I kind of reverse this a little bit. I like say, so I can see a couple ways that I think that I can help you, but I've actually got a couple extra questions to make sure that we're the right fit. And then I hit them with a COI trigger type question, like, okay, and it might be something quite specific. Like if you were here, if you want to get to here and you make no progress at all, how much does that hurt? Give me a score out of 10. And if they go, oh, 1, it's not going to hurt me at all. At that point, I might like say, well, I don't think we can help you. Because they're clearly a know-it-all. They're not coachable, the whole bit. But if they say, oh, 5, 6, anything above, I go, thank you for being so honest. Okay, next question. The ROI question for me is, I'll say something along the lines of, they say, oh, I want to be able to book 16 meetings a week. I'll say, okay, well, how much is that worth to you? They give me a dollar figure, which I may have already got earlier. But then I'll say, all right, so if I was to introduce technology and training to help you get to that result, would you define that as a cost or an investment? Pause. And and it's interesting. Then people have to go around and they go, and there's some people that say, oh, it's a cost. And I'd say, why do you consider it a cost? But what I'm doing is I'm reminding the person that if they're going to be spending, if they want to get a $10,000 outcome, they're probably going to have to invest $2,000, which is why this word investment is key. So I do it slightly back to front. Anyway, back to you, Johnny.
Yeah.
So these are our framing questions where we're setting up the relationship to be able to, we've talked about the cost of inaction, which is far more persuasive than the return on investment. A lot of people go straight for the return on investment. You know, if I can get you this and it's only going to cost you this, what do you say? We got a deal? You seem like a smart and intelligent person. Where it actually doesn't work that way. The cost of inaction is the stronger trigger. The ROI is actually logic. COI is more about emotion. And then we've got the mission element.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you will find your own groove in this. As you can see, James and I take slightly different approaches to the exact same methodology. And that's what we expect from everyone, which is why when someone says to me, John, can you give me a full sales script? I say, no, I shouldn't give you a full sales script. You're going to find your groove, but having the blocks in front of you is about knowing that there's a specific system you got to go through, right? And if you can meet the elements of the system, you'll get the results. So now we get to anchoring the options. Now, you've probably heard us say this before, Patsy preferred premium, right? And of course, we want everyone to get into our preferred. So for anyone who doesn't understand what anchoring is, well, first of all, anchor pricing is about using big numbers to make your number not feel so big. It's the same way you walk into a Gucci store because you see a handbag in the window, or a jacket in the window, or whatever tickles your fancy in the window. You'll ask the shop attendant, they'll say it's worth $5,000. You'll freak out. They'll say, we've got this one here, it's $1,000.
Yeah,
$1,000 is not expensive.
Wow, that's incredible in comparison to the other thing about when you talk about ROI. I've seen you do this and I've heard you do this, John, where you're talking about the ROI that they can get and you're throwing down these big numbers.
Absolutely.
And that there is another form of anchor pricing. So when you bring your price in comparison to these bigger numbers, suddenly the investment doesn't seem so big. But when we're talking about options, which I can see on the screen here, options, you are going to introduce options to them, and the options are going to give you the opportunity to anchor price the options toward the decision that you would like them to make.
Absolutely. And by the way, just to James's point, I want to workshop that for a second, because I did this in a call at the end of the year. So I sold a $4,800 accelerator, and for the client in the $4,800 accelerator, it was a no-brainer, because in terms of anchoring it, one sale for them was worth $38,000. So $38,000 sale, it's one sale in their business. versus $4,800 investment. Now that's another good example of anchoring, and it makes my number feel easily digestible, so that's to James's point. I've used that active, and depending on the scenario, you'll use different things. But yes, so anchoring the options is about, what your preferred is. Okay, you need to have a premium offering in there to make the number feel not so bad in the middle. And by the way, if you don't have a premium offering and you don't have that whole ROI trigger style scenario we just brought up, another good option there is to compare it to some other service provider, perhaps. I've said to people in the past, you could go to ABC agency, and I'll mention the agency, and spend this amount of money to get this type of outcome. I know that because those clients have then come and knocked on my door. Or you could sit here and we can get you these outcomes that you're looking for. So if you don't have anything, you can use someone else as a comparison. Dash, we compare to HubSpot. Hey, you could go for HubSpot. HubSpot has
thousands of dollars.
Thousands of dollars. It has all these great features. I love HubSpot. I've used HubSpot, but you don't need 99% of the tool, which is why we're sitting here for the consultants, the coaches, the trainers in our world. So anyway, that's one side. And then the Patsy side is about having something that doesn't feel so great. So it's like the wine in the restaurant, right? No one ever wants to go for the cheapest, because if you're out with friends, nobody wants to be the tired ass, right?
Yeah, and there's a science around that, which is exactly the same science that we teach. There's a science behind wine menus where you actually have the Patsy in the wine menu, which are the cheapest ones that they don't want anyone to buy. Then they have the ones that are mid-range, which are slightly more than the cheapest. And then they jump up and then they have the most expensive.
And by the way, where do you reckon they make the most profit? It's on the mid-range.
One in the middle?
Yeah, it's the mid-range wines, right?
Yeah.
Priced appropriately, and it's where they want people to be. So the Patsy is about having a version of what it is that you offer, but in comparison to the preferred, it's a no-brainer to spend a little bit more money to go for that preferred option.
So if you're already part of our community and part of the B2B school and part of our world, there is some units in the pointy end training program, which are all about the 3-part proposal. So you can see on the screen, there's a big box which says options. And John will usually start on the right, and he'll start with the biggest option. So he'll go, here's the biggest option, but I'm not sure whether this is the right one for you. You tell me what you think. Now, some people might just immediately go, ooh, and they freeze up, right? Because it's way too big. Then there might be another option, which is the Patsy. It's attractive. It's a good price. And they're going, oh, that sounds more reasonable. Then John will dump the preferred one, which is only slightly more expensive than the Patsy, but a lot more value. And it's usually loaded up with the things that they are most interested in. And they'll go, tell me a little bit more about that one in the middle. And then John can do that often by introducing feature 4, feature 5, feature 6.
Yeah, absolutely. Another point I just want to bring up there is as well, sometimes, people, when they've been spending time with you on the phone or on Zoom, when they start to trust you, they'll really value your recommendations. So I find it's also helpful if they seem a bit cloudy about your offer to say, well, I recommend this one for where you're at, because this is going to meet those outcomes and those champagne moments. So sometimes your recommendation, by the way, does mean a lot, even when you're recommending your own product or service. I've done that before when someone I'm selling to is a bit too reserved. They haven't, fully pushed over and said, well, I want that one. I'll say, I recommend this for where you're at. And they'll often agree with me. We get to the pointy end of the call here. We're about to close the deal. The next thing here is getting started. So in my world, this is about mapping out what's next. So, okay, we're going to bring you onto this. Here's the way that's going to work. Here's the setup. So you're going to book in an onboarding call with blah, 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 and that's going to allow you to achieve this. Then we're going to get you into this, and we're going to get you into this. We'll also often have some sort of bonus to make the sale today. So even though someone identifies and says, well, I want that product or service, right? That doesn't, often excuses are going to start to come up as to why they can't do it today. Whether they have to speak to a partner, whether it's domestic or business, their accountant, I've had that one before, whether it's something completely out of the blue, like, oh, I'm not ready to start, or whatever it might be, I haven't got the time. Bonuses often help us close the deal. So we haven't closed it yet. We're just getting toward it. So getting you started, so I detail what's going to happen next to start that process, start getting them into the idea of what they're going to be doing. ROI bonuses, support add-ons. This is about making sure we're giving them what they need to close. The best bonuses, by the way, are often those that get people feeling scared, that don't require a lot of your time or a lot of your in-person.
Yeah, they're the things that people are already scared about.
Yeah.
So like, I'm not going to get enough support. So we have, if you sign up today, you'll get this extra support.
Yeah, exactly
Or
right.
yeah, but I want you to just observe here is that John is drawing this. So he's drawing the 3 options
Yeah.
in the option block. So he's writing down a big number and then another number and then another number. And then he might be circling the one that he's recommending, putting a big tick on the page. But then he's not selling. He's not going into, so which one do you want? He's saying, this is the one that I recommend for you. Plus, here's how we'll get you started. And so this big block at the bottom, he can say, well, the first thing is we'd book a strategy call for this particular date. I'm free on this particular date. So if any of them look good for you, let me know. Here are a bunch of bonuses that we have right now. And of course, I can also throw in some support add-ons.
Absolutely.
And as he's doing that, he's also using outcomes, things, and feelings, because the getting you started can be so we can focus on this outcome quickly.
Absolutely.
Here is a bunch of bonuses, which are things. Here's a bunch of support. So you can feel like we've got your back. So this particular page here in the worksheet where John's drawing, he's drawn 3 options, a recommendation, and then he's loading it up. And the ROI bonuses is an important one because John used the word scarcity, and there are different types of scarcity. There's limited supply scarcity and there's time-based scarcity.
Yeah.
And it's important to work out which is going to be most important for you. Like, and that back to that bonus, sorry, the deposit bit.
Yeah.
Someone's gone and they've said no in the objection handling element. John can go back and go, okay, well, you know, if you can give me a deposit of $480 today, I can lock in those bonuses for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll always try and add some sort of scarcity to this. It's super, super important. You don't want to make it seem like your offer is available freely whenever with all the cool stuff that you're willing to throw in. That's not, you're not doing yourself any favors by doing that. So absolutely, you know, we talk about ROI bonuses, we talk about support add-ons, we talk about, you know, that's all got to be, you know, based around the idea of scarcity. You can't give that away at any other time unless they close now or within some sort of predefined window. Now, if it's above $10,000, that predefined window, in my case, I usually throw it out. It might be 48 hours, you know? So you have to make a decision in 48 hours or we throw that away. The predefined window for less than 10,000, I'll often say 2 day. I can only make this offer to you once. We won't be having another call about this. So ROI bonuses, support add-ons, scarcity is the rule there. And then we get to closing. Now, at this
Before you get into the closing, I just want to say one thing.
Yeah.
In our training program, the Pointy End, we always talk about the value of breaking things down, chunking it down so you can build it up again. Most people don't do that. They haven't chunked down their product and service into all the different units. So you might be thinking, well, what is the bonus I can add? Or what is the support add? Because all you're thinking about is all the things that you already do. But if you chunk it down into little units, you can introduce your core as the preferred elements, the bits that are relevant to the core. But then you've got these other things that you would ordinarily do or that you might do for only some special clients. And you've chunked it down so you can build it back up. And rather than saying, here's what I'm going to do for you, you can pay for my time, suddenly we're back at things, all these different things. All right, we're really in the home straight here, and we've got our close questions.
Absolutely. So first thing I ask, of course, is if they have any questions. At this point, their mind is always running wild. You know, oh, well, what if I don't do this? What if I don't do that? I know it says closed questions here and objection handling. These often go one and the same. So they'll start throwing out these objections as questions. So people won't necessarily say to me, I don't have the time. They'll say, but what if I don't have the time? How much time is it going to take to do what it is that you do? And we want to keep doing what I like to call reducing the ridiculous. I don't think James has heard me say that one before, but reducing the ridiculous is, I've read a lot of sales books, and I don't often take stuff from the 80s, but Tom Hopkins, that's a Tom Hopkins thing from like the 1980s. The point is to basically understand that most people's objections are absolutely ridiculous in nature. Yeah. Like when someone says to me, oh, well, it's too expensive. Maybe the other option they're looking at is $60 a month. I divide $60 a month by 30 days, which is $2. And I say, so for less than the price of a coffee, you're willing to throw these outcomes away. That's reducing the ridiculous. Because when someone says to me, I haven't got the time, I'll say, so for how long does it take you to commute to work? And they'll say, oh, half an hour on either side. I'll say, great. So for the exact same amount of time it takes you to commute to work every day, you telling me you can't dedicate that time once per week to meeting these outcomes to get there? Is that what you're telling me, that your business is not important enough or your livelihood is not important enough to meet those outcomes with that type of cost. So objection handling, have you got any questions? They tend to go one and the same in my world when I'm delivering these. And of course we want to, I like to have a worksheet in front of me. I know what all the objections are. We're in the process of hiring salespeople. I've got to give them a worksheet. I definitely know that. What you might want to do is think about all the objections you faced in the past and think about how you'll overcome them. And as James said, in the pointy end, there's a video I talk all about the common objections that I've copped and how to overcome those. So do you have any questions? I'll always have some. Objection handling will often go one and the same. Let's assume now we've gotten to the point where we've handled these objections, we've handled their questions, we're now ready to close. As I said earlier, one of two things is going to happen. If it's less than $4,800 or even perhaps less than $10,000, we may be able to get a transaction on the spot, and that's what we're looking for. I have a really coy question I'll get to in a second, but the second side of this is if it's over $10,000, of course, my closing point here is, all right, I would like to book a decision call with you. Obviously, I'm trying to get the deposit. Let's say I don't get the deposit. I would like to book a decision call with you so that we can talk about these things and I can show you that stuff to make sure you feel comfortable to move ahead. Can we book that?
And guys and girls, just note the name. It's called a decision call.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Even
in
very
the calendar
deliberately
invite.
called a decision call.
Yeah.
So we don't call sales calls. We call them appointments with purpose because we're delivering value. That's what we're doing. And in the last 15 minutes, we can do some selling, even though there's a lot of seeding throughout it. But that decision call it's clear. Everybody knows why they're booking that particular call.
Yeah.
They're there to make a decision. Sometimes they'll postpone that call, which means they're not ready to make a decision. But if they're on that call, it's usually a couple more objections or a couple questions or a couple points of clarity that they need.
Yeah.
Do you tell them to bring a credit card or anything like that for those decision calls?
Oh, absolutely. They know that the end of that call is to make a payment. Because what I do before getting that decision call is this. In every call, above $10,000, before $10,000, I ask a question. And I often say something along the lines of, all right, I've just got one last question for you. It's going to make you laugh. Are you ready? It's going to make you laugh. I guarantee you're going to giggle. I'll say that in the call and I'll say, oh, what is it? Visa or MasterCard?
Yeah.
Is what I'll say.
Visa. I love that one.
Visa or MasterCard. Now, here's what happens. If they're totally bought in.
Are you serious? Yes.
Well,
Visa
no.
Then.
if it's like if I'm selling one of our courses, I've had people just start with the number and say, okay, it's a MasterCard, right? Without laughing.
Yeah, laughing.
They'll just give it to
let me just get my wallet.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Let me do a transfer really quickly. Now, if they're not ready, this is where, of course, I try and get a deposit. And if I can't get the deposit, this is where we go to a decision call. So there is, those layers exist. Now, I don't ever go to a decision call for anything that's like one of our courses, $1,500 and 1997, 997. And
they'll say, can we book a call for next week? And I've seen you do it. You go, no.
Yeah.
No, I don't have time to book another call for next week at this particular price point.
Remember what I said earlier.
Deposit now, and we can do it now, or best of luck.
Exactly right. Remember what I said earlier. Every minute that you spend trying to close a deal tallies up, right? And the reality is, you don't want to throw away time for someone who may or may not spend $1,000. Different story above 10 grand. Because you're going to equate what it's going to take for you to close a deal. And I mean, by the way, those of you who are using B2B Dash, I don't know if you know, in the payments platform, you'll actually see from the time someone starts or you create a deal in the pipeline to the time someone closes, it gives you an indicator of how many days it takes to close someone.
Yeah.
So pay close attention to that because that's going to help you understand what it actually takes for you to close a deal. You might be spending too much time trying to close it $1,000 and missing out on
$1,000. Why bother? Don't
right?
bother. Move on to the ones that are.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So I'll ask Visa or MasterCard. Sometimes I'll give it to me on the spot. If they, can't make the commitment, I'll try and get a deposit. If I can't get a deposit, I'll go to a decision call if it's $4,800 and above. And if it's under $4,800, I won't go to a decision call. It's now or never, right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much.
So I've got my own way of doing this sort of stuff as well too. You notice how these got close 1, close 2, close 3. And John's already mentioned they're not always in that order. So often, if you got any questions, they bring them up. We do some objection handling, whatever it's going to be. But for me, I will usually say, do you have any questions? Because I've got 2 more questions for you. And they'll say, oh no, I'm over my questions. What are your 2 questions? And this is one of my favorite questions. And I know that John uses it. It just hasn't come up today. But it sometimes comes up as the ROI trigger as well too. But what I will say is, okay, we've just talked about this, blah, 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 blah. And we've looked at the 3 different options. My recommendation for you is the middle option, which is $4,800. Here's the question, guys and girls. This is my favorite question of all the questions that I ask. $4,800. Is that within your reality? So I'm not saying, have you got the money or can you afford it? I say, is that within your reality? And they'll either come back with, yes, it is within my reality, or no, it's absolutely not within my reality. And if they say it's not within my reality, in a way, it's almost back to the drawing board, because we have to go back to, which is not bad. You go back to the options again and you go, okay, well, if that's not the option, let's have a look at this option, or I might be able to introduce another layer of options. But that question, is that within your reality, is an incredible question for getting honest answers. Now, when I say, is that within your reality, they say, they'll often say, I don't know, about 70% of the time, 80% of the time, yeah, that is within my reality. I'll say, okay, I got one final question for you. Ready? It's the most important question in the conversation. They go, what is it? And that's when I go, Visa or MasterCard.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's fantastic. And for a guy that's an uncomfortable seller, which I am, and a lot of people don't believe it, but I am, if I can run an entire sales call just by asking questions, I feel so much better. Just a long list of questions that I can work through, which is why Johnny's got this worksheet here, which if you can add a question for every single one of those boxes, the sales calls will pretty much run themselves.
I mean, let me tell you, the most important thing when it comes to sales is to be a listener. There's a reason why introverts often are better at selling than extroverts, right? And that's because extroverts like to jibber jabber and chat. And don't get me wrong, I mean, that's me, right? I had to unlearn a lot of that and learn to listen. Maybe it's because my wife gives me a hard time. I'm now really good at that. But I had to learn to listen, and that's what made me a good seller. Actually taking a step back, and of course we're here to give value, and all that sort of stuff is key. But by asking questions, you're putting them in the driver's seat to give you the information, to give you the things that are bugging them to open up, right? And anytime you're doing 99% of the talking, guess what? I can almost guarantee you will not close the deal. If you're asking questions and you're getting them talking, and it becomes like this kind of 40-60 split where you're speaking 60% of the time, they're speaking 40% of the time, like that's really the sweet spot. You want them to be talking. You want to ask enough questions to get them involved, because the reality is, I mean, people don't want to feel like they're being lectured to, right?
Yeah.
That's why I hated school. I wasn't allowed input. I was just told what to do and yada, yada, and I switched off. People are going to do the same thing in a sales call if it's just all you. So, you don't have to be an extrovert to be good at sales. In fact, my brother is one of the best salespeople that I know. He's on like a big 6-figure salary working for big companies
and
as
then
a
commission.
sales director and commissions.
So he's got his 6 figures, and then he's got his massive commission. Yeah. And he is a very quiet-spoken guy.
He's a very quiet guy. James has met him. Simon's met him. He's a quiet guy. He's reserved. He was the kid who, when I was running around taking my clothes off as a kid, going around in circles, looking like that kid from I don't know. I can't remember, the Wild Thornberries. If anyone's seen that, my brother was hiding behind my dad's leg. And yet he is probably one of the best salespeople that I know. So you don't have to be an extrovert. You got to have a good system, and you got to ask enough questions. Listen, you'll get the sale.
All right, cool. So we've got a couple extra minutes just to answer any questions, or at least make any observations, or share some of your observations as we ran through this together. There is a little bit there after deliver on your promises. We probably shouldn't need to say that, but if you say, let's do a decision call, you immediately need to send the email where they can book the decision call, or you can book it on the phone right there using a tool like B2B Dash, where they put in their details and they book. If you've promised to give them information, give them information. If they've paid the money, make sure that the first step actually happens. I think someone said, what if I don't have a facility for taking credit card details? I think it was Chris who said that. If you're using B2B Dash, one of the levels of B2B Dash, you can take credit card payments using that. There are all sorts of different options out there from PayPal to Stripe. We obviously would prefer you use B2B Dash because we have a vested interest in that, but also B2B Dash connects with the booking tool, the email follow-up tool, and all the other stuff that you want to go with. Now, just some observations here. I've just noticed that people have been really interested in the efficiency element that you were talking about, John, just being aware of how much time that you can spend. I thought it was cool that JD piped up a lot earlier and he basically said, that's how I came into your world. He thought it was hilarious because he obviously had a strategy call with you. And then
he was actually a 96 deposit.
Yeah. All right. Okay. $96 deposit. There you go. Cool.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. I was talking about objections. What was your fun expression with objections, John?
Reducing the ridiculous, that one.
Reducing the ridiculous. I saw Barry said fear, James, FEAR. And he's heard me talk about this before because my mum says the word fear is an acronym that spells false evidence appearing real. And most objections are false evidence appearing real. They worry about something that's not real. Andrew, just when I was talking about the sandwich, wrote, sandwich. I also noticed that Louise had said, how do you show the different pricing and the examples? Now we can bring up slides. We can introduce them to our website. We can bring them to a pricing page, but I think it's just better if we draw the options in the option box.
I agree. The problem with most pricing pages is there's just way too much information. And what you don't want is create extra obstacles by having someone, all right, now do this because they're on Zoom. Hang on, let me just read every fine little element of this pricing page. You're going to lose them, right? We write it down. I mean, it's not like anything's going to differ, but when you're giving it to someone rather than having them read it, I mean, the chances are they'll digest it better when you're talking through it. So we write it down on a piece of paper.
There's a lot of chatter about the value of taking a deposit. And I noticed, I think it was Naomi and both Fiona said when they began taking deposits, it made a big difference. They got a better quality client. There was less of that chasing. There's also a lot more certainty, that in you and what you've been able to achieve on the call. You know that they're different. Louise liked the distinction between COI and ROI being emotion and logic.
Yeah.
Most people go straight to the logic. It's all about the ROI, baby. It's all about the ROI. But decisions are not made on logic alone. Logic usually to justify the emotion.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing there is I found if I've ever led with ROI, I often get asked the question, but what if I can't achieve that? Because people doubt themselves all the time. They doubt you, they doubt themselves. If you throw the COI first, they don't have those doubts. Because
also, as part of our value add, we talk about the target audience, and that's part of our value add. It's part of what we do in the B2B school when we chat with someone for the first time. And there are audiences that you can't deliver ROI because the value that you're delivering for them in their situation is just not going to be enough. And that's part of the reason why it's useful to have a diagnostic or a triage form in advance, so that you will know when you have the conversation whether or not they're going to get the ROI.
Absolutely. You want to, the reason you have these systems in place, and we haven't gone over them a lot today, and we won't, that's what the pointy end is for, but the reason you have these systems in place, like the triage form and stuff like that, is to make sure you're being as efficient with your time as possible, and you're selling to people that are more likely to close rather than those who aren't. Before we had that system in place, I mean, James will recall, my diary was always fully booked, and it was great on paper. John's got 30 meetings this week. Fantastic. But if half of them don't qualify, it's not a good use of your time. So you want to have those systems in place. Remember that filtering out those people is just about making sure you're more efficient with those that you are going to have a conversation with. And it'll also up your close rate, because there's nothing worse than hitting 0 and 16 in a row because it turns out that those people just weren't qualifying.
So I'm just going to finish on one observation that was just coming up a lot just then, and I'm going to tie it back to something that we were talking about just before I hit record. And just before I hit record, I'd made the observation that Wendy had asked about trying to get over the idea of struggling with the idea of I need to get more pushy with sales. And my response to that is you don't need to be more pushy with sales. You need to be able to present the information. Now, interestingly, Wendy is someone who ended up signing for one of our bigger ticket products on the phone call, first phone call. I did it in a hotel room just before your wedding, John.
Yeah, I
in
remember.
Byron Bay in the hotel room having a conversation with Wendy on the phone.
I remember.
And closed her on the phone, first call, big ticket, high number. And but I've seen this conversation about what is the female version of what we're talking about. I see that Naomi's recommended a book called Why She Buys. Now, when it comes to this process and selling, it sounds weird to say this, but I would see myself as applying the female version of John's process. And that is just asking a series of questions. By asking all these questions, we're not trying to get someone in checkmate. It's not, I've got you in checkmate and you can't wiggle out. What I'm doing is I'm setting up the scenario for the person to be able to make the decision. Now, when we talk about this, it does sound very aggressive, but even when Johnny does it, it's not so aggressive. He's just presenting the facts. He's presenting the information. And then at the end, there's a decision for them to make, because there's only one person who can close the sale. And is it you? Is it me? Is it Johnny?
It's them.
No, it's them. They are the one person that can close the sale.
So one thing I always say to people who ask me a very similar question, about tone in any type of call, and if there's a certain way they should be, I often say the best salespeople are a little bit like a chameleon. A chameleon blends into the surroundings. So if a chameleon is on a brown rock, it will try and camouflage brown. Green grass, it'll try and camouflage green. And you can very easily ascertain who you're on the phone with or who you're on a Zoom call with in a couple of seconds, right? It's not hard to do. So once you know, like if I am speaking to someone who's clearly got a much more soft or reserved tone, male or female, doesn't matter. They're not quite as like, whoa, as I am. I'm not going to be, whoa, I'm going to try and match that tone because it's going to make them feel more comfortable in this process. Vice versa, the call I had this morning, that guy was a rambunctious bloke. He was very rah, rah, rah on the phone. So what do you think I was? I was very rah, rah, rah on the phone to match that. Still following the process. I didn't turn into anything I wasn't, but just you'll pick up the vibe from people when you have a conversation with them. And I always say, try and be a little bit like a chameleon. Blend in a little bit with how their tone is. I mean, if you see them on Zoom sitting back like this, this is NLP stuff. I sit back like this. If they're sitting like this,
they feel self-conscious and they come forward.
Exactly right. No, seriously, try and match things. Dating 101, by the way, that's also the same thing. Try and match the person that you're against. So.
There is an interesting discussion going on about women selling to women. We can continue that on the Facebook group. But what I will finish with Craig's observation is that mirroring someone is about empathy. And empathy is super important. At the moment, what we're doing is we're talking about closing someone on the first phone call, but that only comes about when we deliver value. If we're not delivering value, we're not going to get the result. And it's a great place to finish because that's the best thing that we can do in business. If we want to be good at business, the best thing that we can do is serve. So Johnny, please give John a big fat round of applause, not just for running through everything that he did today, but being generous enough to supply his one call close formula and also the worksheet to go with it. Yay, Johnny! If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. If you've got sentences that you use during client conversations, share your sentence below as a comment. If you are looking for the one call close, what the fuck's it called? If you are looking for the one call close formula worksheet, check the description below and you'll find a link. Bye for now.